Japanese art of forest bathing. It is based on the premise that being immersed in the atmosphere of the forest improves well-being. And I'm certain that you will find that Lynn's photography and narration will instill in you a sense of peace, calm, joy, and wonder. Foggy Bottom West End Village member Lynn Cates' interest in photography began after she retired. You might know her, if you're a Foggy Bottom West End villager, as a person behind the camera at village events. However, she is most at home photographing nature. As you will see today, she is passionate about combining her love of photography with her love of exploring America with her cross-country road trips. Without further ado, I'll turn this over to Lynn. Enjoy the time with her, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jackie. I want to thank Jackie for creating Art Thursday. I've thoroughly enjoyed our previous sessions, and I really am honored to be asked to do this one. I also want to thank Jonas because he's been getting us all together during this pandemic. He's been extremely instrumental in making sure we all stay connected, and I think this is important to many, many of us. And I want to thank you for joining us today. We'll get started now. So Jonas, would you please mute everybody but me? And then I'm going to share my screen, and I would ask you, Jonas, to please close the thumbnail of me. Thank you. My art is photography, as you heard. I took a few pictures before I retired, but I didn't get serious about photography until about 5 years ago. Right about then, I came across something by Ralph Waldo Emerson that resonated with me and helped me explain why I was so passionate about my newfound art. Oops, hang on just a second. There we go. What I wanted to do, to paraphrase him, is I wanted to scatter joy wherever I go. And I've learned that I want to do this by sharing the beautiful and peaceful things I'm drawn to photograph. I've also learned that I want to do this by sharing beauty and peace. And today I want to scatter joy and beauty and peace by sharing with you my love of forests. I'll use my photography to help you learn about forest bathing. The term shinrin-yoku was created in 1982 by the Japanese Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Ministries. It can loosely be translated into English as the Japanese art of forest bathing, or to absorb the forest atmosphere, or to just simply spend time in nature. As of the end of last year, there were over 800 guides in 55 countries and over 300 forest bathing guides in the US alone. As Jackie mentioned, forest bathing, or shinrin-yoku, is based on the premise that being immersed in the forest improves well-being. It's been documented to lower heart rate, blood pressure, and stress hormones, and it instills a sense of peace and calm, yet is quite energizing. Some say it refreshes the soul. Forest bathing per se, you don't have to officially do forest bathing. You can enjoy the forest, and many have throughout history, really. This phrase is going around the internet right now. There's no Wi-Fi in the forest, but I promise you will find a better connection. So even though people may not officially be forest bathing, a lot of people are doing it. So how do you do it officially? Well, you go into the forest, you can go by yourself, or you can go with others, and you can either sit or you can walk around, or both. Put yourself in a calm, relaxed state. Take a few deep breaths, relax your muscles, and immerse yourself in everything around you. It's important to be present, to be mindful, to be alert of all these things, and ignore everything else. Ignore the chatter in your brain and just let the rest of the world slip away. Forests are very complicated, chaotic places. And there are really two main ways to go about forest bathing. You can either let your mind wander and just let it all sink in, or you can focus on one thing at a time. And I honestly do both. You can focus on what interests you, what makes you curious. I love focusing on what makes me smile. And you want to use all 5 senses. Use the sense of touch to feel things like the rough bark on this tree or the leathery, papery bark on this river birch. Here is damage to the bottom of a redwood tree. You can see the fire damage, but here is the silky smooth surface of what's called a buttress. And it is so cool and so smooth, it's just fun to touch. You might also want to feel the sunlight on your face. It can get cool in shady forests, and so to have sun coming through the branches can feel awfully good. And if you're in a redwood forest in the early morning, you can feel the cool mist of the fog. And I can tell you that just feels delicious. Your sense of hearing comes in handy to hear all of the birds singing and maybe just the wind blowing through the trees. If there's water where you're going, you might listen to the sound of the water flowing. That can be extremely relaxing. Or on a hot day, you might want to sit somewhere like on this little ledge right here and dip your toes in the water. As Lorna mentioned, the sense of smell is important in the forest, not just the fresh smell of the forest itself, but here as I was walking along the path, I was just overwhelmed with the wonderful fragrance of these multiflora roses. This is right here in DC. And you might want to taste something. Be sure it's edible first, of course, but these little blueberries were growing in a forest in West Virginia. And of course, then there's the sense of sight, which we're going to be using today. And I like to say the sense of wonder, because man, the things you see in forests are certainly wonderful. This is one of my old friends in Yosemite. This is a little path, and this face greets me whenever I go down that path. I'm always fascinated by the shapes of tree branches. And this is right here in DC. And this is a black walnut tree. And it has just beautiful branches. And I'll be showing you lots of different kinds of branch shapes later. And here are some others. And you can see that the leaves in the spring here in DC were a beautiful lime green. And here are different kinds of leaves here, and then the lacy little black walnut leaves. And the sweet gum leaf, and the ginkgo leaves, which have just such a fun shape. I always enjoy seeing ginkgos. One of my favorite kinds of leaves to see are little redwood sorrel. These clover-like plants cover the forest floor in redwood territory, and I just love them. And here you could also focus on the dew on these little leaves. One of the things that I've been interested in is to see the vines hanging from trees right here in DC. That's been a lot of fun to see. And you might run into a spider web here and there, or this beautiful thistle. And in Glacier National Park last spring, I saw these tiny little forget-me-nots, and I was delighted to find bear grass. This was also in Glacier. Bear grass only blooms every 7 years, so it was quite a treat to be able to see the forest floor covered with these. You might see mushrooms, but of course don't eat them unless you really know what you're doing. And then it's always a pleasure to find a nice, comfortable place to sit. Here are some benches in the redwood forest. So what do you bring to Forest Bathe? The most important point is to be comfortable. There are no fashion police in the forest. You wear comfortable clothes and shoes, and if you think it might be wet, like in a redwood forest, you might want to bring a poncho or something to help protect you from water dripping from trees. You need to bring some drinking water and some snacks, and then think about sunscreen or insect repellent depending on the season. You might want to consider bringing a small canvas stool in case you don't have one of those handy benches in your forest, because that way you can just park yourself comfortably and not have to sit on the ground. Some people bring magnifying glasses so that they can see the little things and enjoy spending a lot of time investigating that kind of stuff. What you don't need for this kind of bathing suit I'm bathing is a bathing suit, and you don't need a towel unless you plan on getting wet. It's not a good idea to have your electronic devices turned on when you're trying to forest bathe, but I think most of us nowadays travel with a phone in our pocket, and that's a good idea for safety reasons. What I also use my phone for when I'm forest bathing is I might see a bird that interests me, or some plants or trees or flowers, and I found these free phone apps help me identify these birds or plants or whatever once I get home. And so Merlin Bird ID helps you with bird identification, and an app called Picture This helps you identify plants and trees. So where do I like to go forest bathing? Well, you'll hear me say redwoods about 1 million times today, because my very favorite place is the Redwood National and State Parks, and we'll go there. Also, Yosemite National Park is really hard to beat, and I just love the Great Smoky Mountains. I've also become fond of the Olympic National Park in Washington State, and particularly the Hoh Rainforest there. And you'll see pictures from all of these places today. But this spring, I wasn't able to go on my road trip for obvious reasons. And so I needed to forest bathe here, right here in town in DC. And I did most of my forest bathing on the Capitol Crescent Trail. And I'll show you that trail in a moment. You can also forest bathe here in Rock Creek Park, Theodore Roosevelt Island, the National Arboretum, Botanic Garden, or actually your own backyard or any neighborhood park. You don't need a big fancy forest to be able to forest bathe. You just need a little nature that you can bury yourself in. So today I'm going to take you on 3 trips through forests. The first 2, the Redwoods and the Capitol Crescent Trail, I'm going to narrate, and I'm going to show you the kinds of things that I look for when I'm forest bathing, the kinds of things that help me just forget the rest of the world. And then for the 3rd trip, I'll take you on a trip of a forest across America. And for that trip, I'm going to leave you on your own to practice forest bathing. So here we are in my very favorite place, Redwood National and State Parks in Northern California. Here you have the coastal redwoods, and these redwood groves are all within 10 miles of the Pacific Ocean. These groves contain the tallest trees in the world. These trees, the tallest is about 380 feet tall, which is about the size of a 35-story building, if you can imagine. These are big, and these are magnificent. I love these places. And what's really fascinating is that those tall trees can come from this tiny pine cone I have in the palm of my hand. It's about the size of an olive, and it contains the seeds that will grow into those huge trees. Sometimes when I forest bathe in the redwoods, I might simply spend a while playing with these pine cones on the floor of the forest and just wondering how in the world can those giant trees come from such a tiny thing? As I mentioned, these trees are all along the coast, northern coast of California, and here you can see fog coming in over the Pacific Ocean into the tops of redwoods. And here you can see the tops of the redwoods enveloped in this delicious fog. And what this does is the fog is crucial to redwood survival for these coastal redwoods because it provides many, many tons of water each day. And now I want to take you through the redwoods. You'll see that not only are there huge trees, but the understory is endlessly fascinating. Lots of plants, including these beautiful rhododendron that usually bloom in May each year. Like I mentioned before, sometimes it's fun just to feel the sun. It may be cool, particularly in the early morning, and here's sunrise through the trees. A lot of the redwoods get damaged by fire, but they still survive. And here you can see one that has growth coming out of the top, even though it's damaged. This one has also been damaged by fire, but you can see it has little branches coming out. These trees just keep on going. As I mentioned, it can get kind of drippy in the redwood, so a poncho is an awfully good idea. You might see little creatures, and I saw this snail one day just making his way across the path. One nice thing about these forests is they're really quiet, and often there aren't many people there. Another old friend in the springtime is little trillium that grow all along the path. And you might be lucky to find a nice place to sit. This little rose was about half the size of my little fingernail. Really tiny little roses on this bush. Here you can see redwoods like to get together, and they actually merge into one tree eventually. And you'll notice there's a lot of looking up in the redwoods, and you can see this fog. It's really beautiful. Here's some of my little redwood sorrel. It's everywhere on the forest floor. And here's a rhododendron up close. These are lovely flowers. Although it was wet that day, that bench came in handy because I got tired after hiking for a while. And again, I love to look at the beautiful shapes of trees, how interesting they can become. These are more trees that have grown together, and you can see that buttress that blends them at the bottom. It's a delight to run into little banana slugs like this. This one wasn't so little. It was about 8 inches long, which is pretty big for those fellows. One of the beautiful things in the redwood forests are all the ferns along the forest floor. Here are some ferns just beginning to open in the morning. You'll see lots of ferns today. I love smooth paths like this. Those are nice for my forest bathing because it's nice not to have to worry about tripping over things. You'll see downed trees in the forest, and the rangers just leave them there because they provide nourishment for new plant life. Like this one, all sorts of things are already starting to grow on and around it. And now we're going to come to the Capitol Crescent Trail right here in DC. You can access this trail from several places, but I like to enter at the Trailhead in Georgetown. It's simply underneath the Key Bridge. I walk along the Potomac until I get there, although what you can do is park right near the trailhead as well. The Capitol Crescent Trail is part of the C&O Canal. The path is about 7 feet wide, so it was perfect for social distancing this spring. And all the pictures from here that you see, I did take this spring during the pandemic. I haven't been able to go out lately because it's been too hot for me, but all of these will have the lush spring growth that you see particularly in May. I love seeing all the different shapes and colors, that lime green of early spring. The smell of these wonderful multiflora roses is just heavenly. Again, I look at the shapes of all these trees and the leaves and the vines. And it's fun to see the birds. These are on branches. They hang out on branches hanging over the Potomac, which runs right along this trail. Another wonderful thing to smell is the fragrance of honeysuckle. It can almost knock you over. It's just so delicious. It was fun every morning to see the new baby goslings, and I got to watch them grow up. They grow so fast, it's amazing. And all the different kinds of leaves you might see. This is wineberry. I hadn't been familiar with it, but it grew wildly along the path. These little berries are a little tangier than raspberries and are edible. And here was some really tall trees with huge vines, and I could almost picture Tarzan swinging through these branches right here in DC. Here's some more mushrooms. Again, I sure wouldn't eat them unless you really know what you're doing. And this is a cormorant, I believe, hanging out over a branch on the Potomac. Sometimes you'll see colorful leaves even in the springtime. These look like fall, but it's not. And this little critter is a non-poisonous snake that I found on the path one day, just right crawling across the sidewalk. Almost looks like fall here, but it's really spring. And this little eastern box turtle was right at the beginning of the path to greet me one morning. There were lots of water turtles as well. Those were in the C&O Canal that runs parallel to this path. And I love the lacy black walnut leaves. Every once in a while, I'd be surprised with pretty little flowers right along the path. And of course, there were some deer. Quite a few days I would see deer on my walks. And now for the last 5 minutes, I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to use my photography and a little music to transport you to some of my very favorite forests from all across America. I'll let you imagine you're forest bathing by yourself. As you look at these photographs, be alert to what you see. See if you can find things that might interest you if you were actually out in the forest. Now take a moment to prepare yourself for this, just as if you were actually going forest bathing. Get relaxed. Just relax your neck, your shoulders. Take a deep breath in through your nose and breathe out slowly through your mouth. And do that again. And now I'd like to conclude with these words by Rachel Carson. Those who dwell among the beauties and mysteries of the earth are never alone or weary of life. Thank you. And now I'll
That was
yeah,
absolutely wonderful.
go ahead. Thank you. Jonas, are you trying to, we can't hear you. Jonas was going to handle questions.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
Ah,
I gave up
yay.
on the headphones. The headphones aren't
Yay.
working.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was as good the second time. I like the pictures changed a little bit from the rehearsal, which made it even more engrossing. We do have plenty of time for some questions. We're going to do this a couple ways. And since my announcement went poorly at the beginning, do remember we are recording. So if you prefer not to show your face or not to have your voice on the recording, feel free to type questions into the chat by clicking the chat icon at the bottom of the screen, and then I can read the questions off. We also should be small enough today that if you'd like to ask questions to Lynn directly, feel free to do that by clicking the raise hand button. And you get the raise hand button by clicking on participants at the bottom of the screen again, and then raise hand in the bottom right hand corner, and then I will call on you to ask questions, or you can type questions in the chat for me to read off. But first, just let's say thank you again for the presentation, and we'll hopefully move on to a series of questions. Lorna had a question. She put her hand up and she typed into the chat. You can read it off if you like, Lorna.
Well, it was splendid. Lynn, it was just wonderful.
Thank you.
I know that you love the Redwoods, but what is your favorite park aside from the Redwoods?
My favorite park? Oh, Yosemite. Yosemite.
Oh, Yosemite?
Yes, I love Yosemite. And then the Great Smoky Mountains are a close second. They're just absolutely wonderful, and they're closer.
And the trees are different, so different, do you find, from East Coast to West Coast?
They can be, but you know, it doesn't really matter. There are some just brilliant trees, even though they might seem pretty mundane. A good oak or good maple is every bit as good as a redwood, depending on how you feel that day. I'm not picky. I'm not picky.
Thank you. Burke had a question as well.
Hi, Burke. I think you're muted, Burke.
Yes, and just remember to unmute before you ask the question. But you're up, Burke.
You're still muted, Burke. I'm sorry.
Here, I was trying to use the upper button. Okay, you got me now?
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay, first, thank you. I'm totally floating, but I noticed, my question is, I noticed that in a number of the trails, including in the Redwoods, looked like they'd be accessible for a walker or a wheelchair. I'm wondering if you had any comments or observations on good parks for accessible forest bathing.
Well, the Capitol Crescent Trail is accessible because that's, you know, blacktop surface. And there are parts of Rock Creek Parkway, particularly when Beach Drive is closed off on Saturdays, when you can be accessible there. And those can be beautiful walks. I belong to a walking group that walks there during non-pandemic times every Saturday morning, and that certainly can be accessible. I'm not thinking of anything else right offhand. You certainly could go out to the Arboretum.
No place in the Redwoods or Sequoia or?
Some of the paths are pretty good. The Lady Bird Johnson Park Grove, where I showed a lot of pictures, most of that is accessible. It's about 1.5 mile circular path, but you really can't get through all of it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
We had a technical question come in from Anne about what kind of camera to use for most of these shots. And
yeah, almost all of these are taken with Nikon cameras. Over the last 5 years, I've had a couple of different cameras. My camera right now is a Nikon D850, and I'm loving it. I really do enjoy it. But several of the photos that you saw there are iPhone snaps from when I was just out walking without my big camera. And those are perfectly fun as well. And like I say, they're great for taking home pictures of things that might interest you. And then you can go online or use one of the apps to try to identify birds or flowers later on.
Another question for Susan.
Uh-huh.
Is there a specific time of day that you prefer to take your hikes, and a specific time of year? And there's a follow-up question, but that's the first question.
Yeah, those are great questions. All of my hikes on the West Coast, I really prefer springtime because things are so lush and beautiful and green there. I got into trouble in 2017 when I tried to plan a fall trip out west, and I had to abort that trip because there were wildfires everywhere I wanted to go. And likewise, you can see how that's already happening in California this year as well. And so that would interfere with my travel. So I try to go out west in the springtime. I'm a morning person for these kinds of walks. It just starts my day so well. And I find that if I don't go out in the morning, I might make excuses and not ever get out. So I prefer morning. I also don't like heat. And so I love the chill air in the morning, beginning in the fall. Like I say, I haven't been able to go out much lately because I can't tolerate the extreme temperatures that we've been having lately.
Are the parks you go to open all year long? So this is a year-long profession?
Absolutely, absolutely. Of course, there were a lot of closures during the pandemic, so I can't swear to what's open. I've talked to friends near Yosemite, and Yosemite is open on a limited basis right now. They only accept so many cars a day, et cetera. So if you plan to go during the pandemic, you need to check ahead and see what is open for you. But all the ones around here are open. The Arboretum has limited hours now during the pandemic, and I don't know if the Botanic Gardens are open right now.
Another technical question. Do you use different lenses from Alan when you're taking these pictures?
Yes, I do. My favorite lens is a Nikon 28-300 because it is so versatile. And if you're hiking a long way, you don't want to carry a lot of gear. And that one lets you take close-up or distance zoom shots. But I also love my wide angle 12-24 Nikon lens because that lets me take the panoramic views of the tops of the redwoods. It's particularly good for those kinds of shots. And of course, you can use a macro lens for the flowers if you want, but the 28-300 works just as well for the macro shots. Those are my favorite lenses.
Hello.
Uh-huh.
Hi, I wondered if you or anyone you know of has looked into or used these nature photographs for healing purposes, say for our critical care first-line workers, many of whom are not able to get outside but are really in need of stress relief. And it just popped into my head that this would just be a wonderful thing for them. Yes. On a break, say at the hospital.
Well, I'm with you there. There are professional photographers who make videos like this and sell them to hospitals. I know one in particular who does beautiful work and sells his videos commercially to hospitals and places like that. And you'll notice I go to GW Hospital, and there they have a lot of art in all the waiting rooms and hospital rooms and things like that. I found when I first started taking pictures, I just started making videos a couple of months ago, frankly. I made a little video of some tulip magnolia shots that I did. And that got me into the idea of doing it myself. I am not a professional photographer in that I don't sell my work. And so I enjoy just sharing it. And soon, my parents had been in a facility, a CCRC, and I found that some of the people there loved to just do slideshows of my photos from my website, and that was comforting to them. And there are quite a few people that do that, just simply going to my website and doing slideshows. But I haven't looked into officially doing it and giving it to hospital workers, but I'd be happy to do that if you wanted to look into it.
Great. I'm going to look into it and hopefully contact you.
Oh, great. That's excellent. I can't tell who's speaking because you,
yes, it's under Bob. It's
Oh,
actually Debbie and Bob.
oh,
Hi.
okay, great. Okay. I look forward to hearing from you.
And could I get, is your website on the, probably on the email from the village?
Well, I don't think it is, but it's very simple if you happen to have a pencil. It's
Sure.
rdtrpr.com.
rdpr.com.
Road Tripper.
Road Tripper, yes. rdtrpr.com. Okay.
And I can put a link to that in the post email I'll send out too. I can make sure there's a link to that as well as a link to this video.
And what you can do is at the top of the right-hand top of each page, if you click onto a gallery, it'll say slideshow. And you can just click that and it'll give you a slideshow of all the photos in that particular gallery.
Oh, it's wonderful. Thank you so much.
It's also a wonderful way to see the country.
Yeah.
Yes, I do have photos of all my road trips there too.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for that question. We had a few more come in. Do you take binoculars when you're doing this sort of work?
Do I take what now?
Binoculars.
I don't, because my zoom lenses work just as well. So I don't carry binoculars when I go out. But if you don't have a camera with a zoom lens on you, then you might want to do that. It's a great idea.
You might not know the answer to this one, but is there a queue to drive into the Arboretum? Have you been there since it reopened?
Is there? I know that it had hours in the afternoon, but I don't know, and they only limit a certain number of hours, but I don't know how that works. I was actually at the Arboretum. I love the tulip magnolias in the spring. I was there, I believe it was on March 24th, shooting those. And when I was asked to leave by the security guards because that was the day they closed the Arboretum. And I have a little video, I'll give Jonas the link to send out to everybody, of my tulip magnolias. And it mentions the fact that I was shooting them right up until we got closed down in the Arboretum. I believe it's only open in the afternoon right now, but you should look on their website to make sure.
How do you organize your pictures, considering how many of them there are, so you can retrieve them and sort through them?
Oh, that's a really good question. And one of the tasks I've set for myself while I'm during the pandemic is to revise my websites. I have it organized by galleries right now, and some of the galleries are specific road trips, and within those you'll see that one of the galleries might be Redwoods and others might be Yosemite or something like Big Sur or someplace else that I've been. But also I have my galleries organized by state. And so I might only have a couple of photos from Alabama, but I'll have a lot from some other states.
Good question. Again, you can raise your hand if anyone thinks of any questions. Where's presuming the pandemic ends at some point, where is next? Where would you like to go to next for your forest bathing?
Well, I have reservations in Yosemite for next May and for a workshop with a very special photographer who actually worked with Ansel Adams. I got to meet with him one-on-one for a day last year when I was in Yosemite. I'm hoping to do that again, but that is completely contingent on the fact that there's a vaccine out and that I've had a chance to get 2 doses of it, and I really think I'd be protected. I think more realistically, my next spring road trip is probably going to be in 2021.
That makes sense. if anyone else thinks of any questions, but I just wanted to thank you again as we get towards the end here. And note that this video will be watchable on the YouTube, and I will make sure the website link is there so you can go back and look through some of the pictures. But if no one else has any questions, I guess we can wrap up. But thank you again.
It was extraordinary, Lynn, just extraordinary.
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you. Thank you, Bert, Christina. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's excellent.
Thank you very, very much, Lynn.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We're going out for a walk.
Oh, good. Right. That was the intent. Okay.